samsaradava nalaliraloka tranaya karuna guna gunatvam praptasya kalyana gunanavasya vande guru shri charanaravindam Mahaprabhu kirtana nitya gita vaditra madhyan manasorasena romanchakampa sutarangavajo vande guru shri charanaravindam shri vigrahara dhananityanana shingarathan mandiramarjanado yuktasya bhaktam sanyunjatapi vande guru shri charanaravindam chaturvida shri bhagavad prasada swadana triptan haribaksha sangram kritraiva triptim bhajata sadaiva vande guru shri charanaravindam Shri Radhika Madhava Yorabhara Madhurya Leela Gunarupanamnam Pratikshanasvadanalolupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravindam Vande Guru Shri Charanaravindam Vande Guru Shri Charanaravindam Nikunjayo no rati kheli sidhai Yayali viryukti rapikshani Tatrati daksha Yativalabhasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravindam Sakshadaриtvena samastashatse uktastatha bhavyateva sarve Kinto pravorya priya eva tasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravindam Yasya prasadha bhagavat prasado Yasya prasada nagati kutapi Jayam stuvam sasaya sasri sadyam Vande Guru Shri Charanaravindam Vande Guru Shri Charanaravindam Vande Guru Shri Charanaravindam Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Chaitanya Nityananda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Chaitanya Nityananda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Chaitanya Nityananda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Hare Rama Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Neelamadava, Radhe. Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe, Jai Radhe. Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadrama, Jaya Sudarshan Chakra. Jaya Sitaram, Sitaram, Jaya Lakshman Hanuman. Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha, Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha, Lakshmi Narasingha, Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha. Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
नमस्ते नरसिंहाय नमस्ते नरसिंहाय प्रह्लादलाधदायिने हिरण्याकाशीपूर्वक्षः शिलटङ्कानकालाये इतो नरसिंहो परतो नरसिंहो ओ नरसिंहो परतो नरसिंहो यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंहो तो यामि ततो नरसिंहो बहिर्नरसिंहो हृदये नरसिंहो नरसिंहो हृदये नरसिंहो नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपद्ये ममदिं शरणं प्रपद्ये तव करकमलवरेणाघाम् अद्भुतशृङ्गा दलिता हिरण्यकशिपो तनुभृङ्गां केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे तव करकमलवरेणाघाम् अद्भुतशृङ्गा दलिता हिरण्यकशिपो तनुभृङ्गा केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे नर हरि रूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय भक्ता प्रहलाद 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 नित्य गौरा हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौरा हरि बोल गौरा हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौरा हरि बोल जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद भक्ति विघ्न विनाशक लक्ष्मी नरसिम्हा स्वामी की जय भक्त शिरोमणि प्रहलाद महाराज की जय श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाबो ये अभिलाषी राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाबो ये अभिलाषी नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः ये तोमार शरण लोय तारा वांछा पूर्ण होय
कृपा कोरि कोरो तारे वृंदावनवासी। मोरा यही अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो वास। नयने हरिबो सदा युगल रूप राशि। नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी। नमो नमः निवेदन धर सखी रणुगत कर। सेवा अधिकार दिए कोरो निज दासी। दीन कृष्ण दास को ये न मोरा होए। श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेम सदा ये न भासी। श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा ये न भासी। यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे। यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। कृष्णा हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। जय वृंदे देवी वृंदे देवी वृंदे देवी जय वृंदे देवी। जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी निताय गौर हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णुभक्ति प्रते देवी सत्यवते नमो नमः वृंदाय तुलसी देव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णुभक्ते प्रते देवी सत्यवते नमो नमः वृंदाय तुलसी देव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च कृष्णभक्ति प्रते देवी सत्यवते नमो नमः वृंदे देवी तुलसी देवी महारानी की जय।
स्मरणेन कालः एतादृशी तव कृपा भगवन् ममापि Durudevami Disham Iha Janina Nuraga Turina Tapi Sunichena Tarorapi Saishnuna Amanina Manatena Kirtanya Sada Harihi Na Thanam Na Janam Na Sundarin Kavitamba Jagati Shakamaye Mama Jammani Jammanishvare Bhavata Bhaktir Haituki Tvai Ainanda Tanuja Kinkaram Patitam Mam Dishame Pavam Buddha Kripaya Tava Pada Pankaja Sthita Duri Satesham Vichintaya Nayanam Galadashru Daraya Vadanam Katkata Rudaya Gira Pulaka Nichitam Vapur Kada Tava Nama Kahane Bhavishati Yuga Itam Nimishena Chakshusha Pravisha Itam Shunya Itam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Virahena Me Ashrisha Padratam Pinnastumam Adarshanam Marmhatam Karotuva Yatha Tatha Va Vitatatu Lampato Mad Prananatha Tusa Eva Na Paraha Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Chaitanya Shikshastra Kampi. Glory to Shri Krishna Sankirtan, which declares the heart of all the thoughts accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life for repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime definition of humanity at large, because Christ is the definition known. It is life for all transcendent knowledge. It increases total transcendental bliss and enables the fully tasted access which it will always quench. O my Lord, your holy name alone grants all foundation human beings, and thus there are hundreds of millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendent names there are massive all the transcendent entities. They are not even hard of us which attend to these things. O my Lord, out of kindness enable us to easily approach you by your holy names. But I'm so unfortunate I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than a straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready of all respect for others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to commit wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your constant devotional service, birth after birth. O Samharananda, I'm your eternal servitor, yet somehow I have fallen into the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me at one island of lotus. O my Lord, while my eyes be decorated with tearful love flowing constantly when I chant the holy name, one will my voice choke up, one will tear my body stand and I recitation of your name. O Govinda, feeling of separation and constant moment to be like millennium. Tears are flowing from eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and shall remain so even if handles me roughly by his embrace. What makes me broken hearted by not being present before me? He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worship of the Lord, unconditionally. Shri Chaitanya Shikshastra Kampi. Shri Mangala Aarti prayers ki jai. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chacho Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamakyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuddha Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shri Rupam
Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sairaitam Saradhutam Parijana Sahitam
Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vidam Sha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namini Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharini Niveshesha Shunyavadi Pachattesha Tarini Nama Om Vishnu Padaya
Krishna Prishna
Prishaya Bhutale
Srimate Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Namini Shivarsavanavi Devi Daya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vigyana Dayane Prabhave Namaha Madhur Ujvala Premadya Shri Rupanuga Bhakti Da Shri Gora Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Virudapa Apasidanta Dvantaharine Namo Guru Kishoraya Sakshadvairagya Murtaye Vipralambara Sambhade Padambujayate Namaha Namo Nodaya Satchinandanamine Gora Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gora Vir Bhava Bhumestwam Nirdesta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Savabhuma Sri Jagannathayate Namaha Vanchakalpa Turabhyascha Kripa Sindhubhye Bacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namne Guru Chase Namaha Panchatatvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhakta Avataram Bhakta Kam Namami Bhakta Saktikam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Jayatam Sudator Bangur Mama Manda Mater Kate Matsarva Swapadam Bojo Radha Madan Mohano Divyad Vindaranya Kalpradumata Shimad Ratnagara Simhasanastito Shimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prestali Bihi Sevyamanav Smarami Shiman Rasa Rasarambivam Sivata Tatastita Karsan Venuswaner Gopir Gopinatak Striyestuna Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhi Vrindavaneswari Vishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Guru Pranama prayers ki jai Shrimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj ki jai Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Tinamini Namaste Saraswati Deve Guruvani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Sitarane Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Gaur Premanandi Haribol. So we're continuing today in this special lecture which is understanding and living according to the laws of material nature established by God. And this is called the science of self-realization and reincarnation and beyond. And so it's from August 1976. And Prabhupada was at London, England, or at the Bhaktivedanta Manor. Okay, so yesterday we began this, and this is an interview by a reporter from the London Broadcasting Company, and his name is Mike Robinson. So we got to the point where we'll quickly go over what we covered yesterday because it's very important. So Prabhupada says, well, the first question is, tell me what you believe, what the philosophy of Hare Krishna movement is. And right away Prabhupada says, Krishna consciousness is not a question of belief. So we looked up on the dictionary what's the definition of religion. It says the belief that blah, blah, blah. So this is a major difference here. Krishna consciousness is not a question of belief, it's a question of science. And then we also explain what is the real meaning of science, not the phony meaning of science, but the real meaning. Science is fact, F-A-C-T. What does that mean, fact? It means that it's something that is true in all realms of reality, on this earth, on the other planets of the universe, in other universes, in the spiritual world also. It's true everywhere, and it is never, and it's true always, at all times, and in all places. That is science, real science, not the junk science that we study, so-called science that we study today. Because the science today is based on speculation, and the theories are always changing, and also they don't even talk about God. They reject the existence of God and the spiritual world, and they reject also an after death. They say there's nothing after death. So they reject almost everything to limit us to a very, very narrow period of time, 60 to 100 years, and there's nothing after that. There was nothing before it. We all came. Everything started by an accident in the universe, and there's no supreme God. So all this is to guarantee that a child that goes through the educational system will become an atheist, or even if they follow some religion, they don't actually believe it. There are many people that follow religion that don't actually believe it. Like I had family members, they were following a religion. If you say, what is your religion? They would say, right away they would say, oh, we are Armenian Orthodox Christian. But they didn't follow anything. Right? And they hardly even went to church. Only my great auntie would go to church, and she would take me. And my mother, father, my brothers, they hardly ever came to church. They'd come on Christmas and Easter most of the time. That was it. Or if someone died, or if there was a marriage. That was it. Right? And there are Hindus like that too. You know, they're not really following anything, or they just follow very, very, let's say, sporadically. Right? So Krishna consciousness is not a question of belief. It is a science. Whether you believe it or you don't believe it, it's still going to act. That's what science. That's what the laws of nature are. It doesn't matter you believe them or you don't believe them. It's going to act on us. So he says it is a science, and the first step is to know the difference between a living body and a dead body. What is the difference? The difference is that when someone dies, the spirit soul or the living force leaves the body, and therefore the body is called dead. So there are two things. One, this body, this material body, and the other, the living force within the body. We speak of the living force within the body. That is the difference between the science of Krishna consciousness, which is spiritual, and ordinary material science. Then ordinary material scientists, they don't talk about the energy that is animating the body, which comes from the soul. They say it comes from carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. What? If that's what's giving energy to the body, why don't you inject those things into a dead body and see if it'll come back alive? It won't. So it's not proteins, carbohydrates, and fats that actually animating the body with energy. Is there any proof of that? Yes. You have people like Raghunath Das Goswami, and the other Goswamis also. They were hardly eating anything. They would just eat 1 teaspoon of ghee. And they stayed alive. And they had plenty of energy. And they hardly slept. They slept at most a half an hour to 2 hours. Some of them were only sleeping half an hour, like Haridas Thakur and Raghunath Das Goswami. And some might have been sleeping 1 or 2 hours. Prabhupada was sleeping like 3-4 hours maximum, but not at one stretch. He would take a little bit of a nap in the afternoon, and he would take some rest and wake up at 12 o'clock and then translate from 12 to 6, 7 in the morning. That's how he wrote all his books. He wrote it at night when no one was bothering him. Everybody else was asleep. So here we see that there is proof that you hardly have to eat anything. to stay alive. Why? Because the living force is coming from Paramatma and the soul. It's not coming from the carbohydrates, the proteins and the fat. But see, who's going to believe that? Only devotees will believe that. The karmis, they say, no, it's not possible. Okay, it's not possible for you because you're nonsense. But if you follow the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness, it's possible. And we have proof of it in the form of the Goswamis and saints like Haridas Thakur and many, many others. Many, many others. If you read the history, the Mahabharata and the Puranas and the original four Vedas and the Upanishads, you'll see there's plenty of people that hardly ate anything. They hardly slept. They didn't need to because they were spiritually ecstatic. And therefore, all their energy was coming from Paramatma. Okay, so although his body is changing from child, so then we studied, it says, that is the difference between science of Krishna, which is spiritual, and ordinary material science. Yeah. As such, in the beginning, it is very, very difficult for an ordinary man to appreciate our movement. One must first understand that he is a soul, or something other than this body. And that's a question. And when will we understand that? Srila Prabhupada. You can understand at any moment, but it requires a little intelligence. For example, as a child grows, he becomes a boy. The boy becomes a young man. The young man becomes an adult. And the adult becomes an old man. Throughout all this time, although his body is changing from a child to an old man, he still feels himself to be the same person with the same identity. Just see, the body is changing, but the occupier of the body, the soul, is remaining the same. So we should logically conclude that when our present body dies, we get another body. This is called transmigration of the soul. But yet, the so-called scientists and philosophers, they're arguing, no, there's nothing after death. So they're trying to reject all that. Why? Because it means that if they accept these things, that means that they are being controlled, that we're all being controlled by the laws of material nature who are established by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So to not accept this, they have to reject life after death. They have to reject that life and everything that's in the material creation started from the intelligence and the power of a supreme being, Krishna. They have to reject these things. Otherwise, they'll get stuck and they'll say, okay, then we should surrender to God. Because they don't want to surrender, they have to reject all these things. They have to reject the existence of the spiritual world. They have to reject the existence of a soul, a spirit soul that's eternal. They have to reject God himself, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the supreme engineer, the scientist, the supreme source of everything. They have to reject that. They have to reject that there's anything after death. And so as you reject these things, your kshetra, your field of activity, becomes less and less and less until you're like a prisoner in a few years of life, and when you die, it's all over. So therefore, what is the purpose of life at that point? It's not self-realization. It's not going back to Godhead. It's to eat, sleep, mate, and defend as much as you can. And you can do it by legally making money or illegally making money. It doesn't matter. You see. That's why you see more and more people are committing sinful acts because it doesn't matter. Nothing's going to happen to them after they die. It's all over. You see how they limit everything down to a very short period of time and no responsibility. That's why, look at all the murders that are taking place, look at all the violence that's taking place, look at all of people who are frustrated. It's all because of this so-called modern education and all the speculation that's going on and all this hatred of God. And more people are becoming atheists. the number of people following Christianity is diminishing in the United States. It already is diminished almost to nothing in England and France. And the people who, so many people are being converted in India also, from Hindus to Christians, or to Muslims, or to Jains, or to Sikhs, or this or that. So this whole thing is deteriorating due to this education. And it's not education, it's actually ignorance. So then it says, although the body is changing from a child to an old man, the person still feels himself to be the same person with the same body. So, you see a picture of yourself when you were 2 years old. You say, that was me, right? Do you say that was someone else?
No.
Someone shows you a picture. You're in your mother's arms. Is that you?
Yes.
You see? So you can't say, no, that's a different person. It wasn't me. No, you know it's you. And you will say, everybody said, oh yeah, that was me when I was 2, when I was 8, when I was 15. Oh, there's the picture when I graduated high school. Oh, there's a picture when I graduated college. And that was my first car, I'm sitting in the car, So you can't deny you're the same person, although your body is completely different, right? And then we talked about, the blood vessels and how many are created every day, how many die every day, so forth. So then it says, next question, so when people die, it is just the physical body that dies? That's a question that Robinson asked Prabhupada. Yes, that is explained very elaborately in the Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, 20th verse, Najayate Mriyate Va Kadachan. We went over that yesterday. And then he says, another question, he says, if the soul is undying, meaning if the soul is eternal, does everybody's soul go to be with God when they die? Prabhupada, not necessarily. If one is qualified, if he qualifies himself in this life to go back home, back to Godhead, then he can go. If he does not qualify himself, then he gets another material body, and there are 8,400,000 different bodily forms in the universe, according to the person's desires and karma. The laws of nature meaning the laws established by Krishna. And who's controlling those laws? Those are the demigods. And you have Yamaraj, you have Lord Shiva, you have Brahma, and above them you have Vishnu. They're all being controlled, these laws of nature. And it says, and there are 8,400,000 different bodily forms according to the desires and karma of the person. The laws of nature give him a suitable body. It is just like when a man contracts some disease and then develops that disease. Is that difficult to understand? And then Mr. Robinson says, it's very difficult to understand all of it. Srila Prabhupada. Suppose somebody has contracted smallpox. So after 7 days he develops the symptoms. What is that period called? And Robinson said, incubation. Yeah, it's a period where the heat in your body increases, which indicates there's a disease in the body, and the body's trying to fight it. And you get a higher temperature and so forth. And also, it's trying to fight the disease. So incubation. So you cannot avoid it. If you have contracted some disease, it will develop by nature's law. Similarly, during this life, you associate with various modes of material nature, and that association will decide what kind of body you are going to get in the next life. So everything depends on association of the modes and association of people, who you're going to be. So, therefore, we should be very careful who and with what we associate. Like if you eat meat, you're associating with the mode of ignorance. If you're only thinking about making money, you're associating with the road of passion or rajas. So most people are rajasic and tamasic. They will never understand anything about God. You can teach them, you can make them sit down and hear lectures. They won't understand anything. They can only begin to understand when they come to the mode of goodness. Okay, so therefore, who we are will be determined by who and with what we associate ourselves with. So if we like to eat meat, if we like to drink wine and beer and whiskey and all those things, if we like to smoke marijuana, if we like to hang out with people that smoke marijuana, if we like to hang out with people that like to speculate all the time, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. What about this? What about that? And we will become like them. And we will become under the control of rajasic and tamasic modes of nature, or gunas. So, similarly, during this life, you associate with various modes of material nature, and that association will decide what kind of body you are going to get in the next life. What kind of body you're going to get in the next life. This is very serious, right? And it says, that is strictly under the laws of nature. You can't escape it. Everyone is controlled by the laws of nature. They're completely dependent. But out of ignorance, people think that they are free. They are not free. They're imagining that they are free, but they are completely under the laws of nature. So your next birth will be decided according to your activities, sinful or pious, as the case may be. And these nonsense people say, oh, there's nothing after death. You see how vicious that is. They are condemning you by speaking like that you'll remain in ignorance and you're going to take birth again. And you don't even know what body you're going to get next. See? That's how serious this is. Of course, people don't take it seriously. They think, oh, well, Hari Vilas is just, exaggerating. It's not that bad. And well, what's wrong with getting the body of a dog? See? One time, Prabhupada in Paris, he was giving a lecture and was talking like this, and one man raised his hand and said, I don't see there's anything wrong with becoming a dog. And Prabhupada said, Tadastu, I bless you to become a dog. And everyone, we were all shocked when he said that. We held our breath, because we knew that's what's going to happen to him, right? This is how stupid French people are. They're some of the dumbest people in the world. But we got some pretty dumb people here also. And in India, there's a lot of dumb people also, right? But the French, they're very special dumb people, right? So this is what you're up against. When you go out preaching, you're going to meet all these crazy people. But that's all right, because you will always find, out of 100, you'll find one that's a little bit interested. And it's worth all the trouble of going through 99 nonsense people, because that one person could become a treasure, if they listen. Okay, so then Robinson asks another question. He says, you said that nobody is free. Are you saying that if we live a good life, we in some way determine a good future for ourselves? Now, that was a smart question, right? Prabhupada, yes. Now, Mr. Robinson says, so we are free to choose what to believe to be important to us. Religion is important because if we believe in God and lead a good life, Prabhupada stopped him. He said, it's not a question of belief. Get this in your head. It has nothing to do with belief. Do not bring this question of belief. It is law. For instance, there is a government. You may believe or not believe, but if you break the law, you will be punished by the government. Now, recently, there was a man in Idaho that killed 4 young college students, 3 girls and 1 man. And it looked like the perfect crime. They didn't have any idea who did it. Now, it turns out that this man was getting his PhD in criminology. That means that he was a very smart guy, and he learned everything about all the techniques of the police to catch a murderer or catch a lawless person, right? And he was getting his PhD in it. So he committed what he thought was a perfect crime and that no one would ever catch him. This just happened. It's still in the news now. It happened about 4 months ago, right? Huh?
3 to 4 months back.
Yeah.
And they took a lot of time to find it.
Yeah, for 4 months, nobody. They kept saying we have no leads. We have no leads. We have no leads. Actually, they did have leads. The man made one mistake, one little mistake, and because of that, they got him. But they had to be sure because he covered himself with everything else because he's a criminologist. He knows how the police investigate, right? He's getting his PhD. He almost finished his PhD. See? So to prove that he was a PhD, he purposely committed this murder of 4 innocent people, right? And then, see, the problem was he used his father's car to come to the scene of the crime, and they were able to figure out who that car belonged to. But it was hard to do that. They knew what color it was, and they knew the make. Now they had to go through every car that's ever been made like that, and to see if it was somebody owned a car like that in the area where the murder happened. They didn't have any other clues. That was the only clue they had, was the car. And that was his only mistake. If he had, let's say, stolen a car, he would not have been caught. Stolen a car and then abandoned it, he would not have been caught. But he used his father's car to go to the place where he killed the 4 people. And now, how did they find who it was? They didn't, I don't think they had the license plate. They just knew what kind of car it was and what color it was. So out of, first of all, they saw how many cars were manufactured like that. Well, and it's not only 1 year they manufactured, so they found out how many years they were manufactured. So then looking at the car, they made an estimate what year it might be, or, what period of years it might be. And then they had to see if anybody had a car like that in the general area where the murder took place. This is an exhaustive way of trying to eliminate, and then they found one car exactly like that, and they seized it, and there was a homeless guy sleeping in the car, and they thought, oh, this is the guy. But then they found out it wasn't him. But he had exactly the same car. So you see how that's why it took 4 months, right? But eventually they found out that it was the father's car. And then the father drove his son. Now, we don't know if the father knew his son killed those 4 people. Probably he didn't. But he drove his son all the way across the United States to Scranton, Pennsylvania. Well, I was born in Pennsylvania, right? So Scranton was about 45 minutes, 1 hour away from where I was born, right? So the father drove him all the way across the United States because his college studies were in Scranton, Pennsylvania, in the university there, right? And by this time they knew who the car belonged to, and they found out because they're not saying anything to the people. The newspapers didn't know anything about what they were doing. They called up police in Pennsylvania or Illinois, one of the states, and they said, stop this car. Don't arrest them. Just stop them and take pictures. And they have those pictures when the car was stopped of the boy was driving, and his father was in the seat, and they talked to the policeman, and they took a picture of them. They didn't even know they were taking a picture of them. And they sent the picture back to the police in Washington State. So now they knew exactly, where the murderer was, and they were following them all the time. And then when they got to Scranton, they knew exactly where the murderer was, and eventually, after observing him for some time, then they decided they had enough evidence to arrest him, and they arrested him. So there was the perfect crime. He only made one little mistake, and even that mistake, it took them a long time to figure out who the car belonged to. It was not easy, right? And one time they made a mistake. There was a car exactly like that. There was a homeless guy in the car. They thought, oh, this is the person. But then they found out he did not commit the murder. So now, this is very interesting. You see how even the smartest people in the world, PhDs, they make mistakes. And eventually, even if they never find the person, that person is going to be punished by Yamaraj. No way they can get away from it. See, because these are laws of nature. Okay. So Prabhupada said, it's not a question of belief. Do not bring this question of belief into this discussion. It is law. For instance, there is government. You may believe or not believe, but if you break the law established by the government, you'll be punished by the government. Similarly, whether you believe or don't believe, there is a God. If you don't believe in God and you independently do whatever you like, then you will be punished by the laws of nature. Now, this is the one thing that we should meditate on. We cannot get away with anything. We will be punished if we break the laws of nature. And what does it mean, laws of nature? It means laws of Dharma. That's the laws of nature. Dharma is what your occupational duty should be. Now, what does that mean, occupational duty? What you should do in life, right? So if your occupational duty is supporting your parents, getting your sister or brother married, giving a dowry, this thing, that thing, that is not your real occupational duty. There's two levels of occupational duty. This is explained in Bhagavad Gita. Two levels of Dharma. So let's see what they are. This has to be understood. Okay, so it is... Okay, I'll come back to this. But there's two levels of Dharma. There's the material, while you're in the material world, there is a lower Dharma, and when you become a devotee, there's a higher Dharma. Let me just see here. Okay. Anyway, this is explained in the 18th chapter and in I think the 4th chapter. Let me just find it. Yeah, okay. 18th chapter, text 47. Shreyan swadharmo viguna paradharmat swanishtita swabhava niyatam karma kurvanapnoti kilbasam. 18th chapter, 47th verse. It is better to engage in one's own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, than to accept another's occupation and perform it perfectly. Duties described according to one's nature are never affected by sinful reactions. Okay, so what does this mean exactly? It means that while we're still attached to material nature, we should learn to engage in sacrifices or ritualistic sacrifices according to the Vedas. Okay, so it says, one's occupational duty is prescribed in Bhagavad Gita. As already discussed in previous verses, the duties of a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra are prescribed according to their particular modes of nature. One should not imitate another's duties. So if you have the qualities of a Sudra, you shouldn't try and get elected to be president of the United States, because that's what's going on now. They're electing Sudras one after another. And that's why everything is a mess in this country and in other countries. If you're a Sudra, you should. There's nothing wrong with being a Sudra. You can go back to Godhead, doing your duties as a Sudra, according to Varnashram Dharma, right? So one should not imitate another's duty. A man who is by nature attracted to the kind of work done by Sudras should not artificially claim to be a Brahmana, although he may have been born into a Brahmana family. In this way, one should work according to his own nature. No work is abominable if performed in the service of the Supreme Lord. So that sentence right there is Daiva Varnashram, God-centered Varnashram. What did he say? In this way, one should work according to his own nature. No work is abominable if performed in the service of the Supreme Lord. The occupational duty of a Brahmana is certainly in the mode of goodness. But if a person is not by nature in the mode of goodness, he should not imitate the occupational duty of a Brahmana. For a Kshatriya or administrator, there are so many abominable things. A Kshatriya has to be violent to kill his enemies, and sometimes a Kshatriya has to tell lies for the sake of diplomacy. Such violence and duplicity accompany political affairs, but a Kshatriya is not supposed to give up his occupational duty and try to perform the duties of a Brahmana. Now, if you're thinking, oh, wow, I want to be a Kshatriya because I can do all these things. No, don't do it. Because you're not a Kshatriya. Kshatriya, to become a Kshatriya, there's a test. You have to be able to defeat a lion with a sword only. Or sometimes you're not even allowed to have the sword. You have to defeat the lion with your hands. So you will not be considered a Kshatriya unless you're able to do something like that. And Kshatriyas have to withstand a lot of pain, because sometimes they get seriously wounded in battle. There's so many things that Kshatriyas have to do that you're not capable of doing. So don't think, oh, I'll become a Kshatriya and then I can drink some liquor and do it. No. It's not an easy thing to be a Kshatriya. So it says, the occupational duty of a Brahmana is certainly in the mode of goodness, but if a person is not by nature in the mode of goodness, he or she should not imitate the occupational duty of a Brahmana. For a Kshatriya or administrator, there are so many abominable things. A Kshatriya has to be violent to kill his enemies, and sometimes a Kshatriya has to tell lies for the sake of diplomacy. Such violence and duplicity accompany political affairs, but a Kshatriya is not supposed to give up his occupational duty and try to perform the duties of a Brahmana. One should act to satisfy the Supreme Lord. For example, Arjuna was a Kshatriya. He was hesitating to fight the other party, the Kurus. But if such fighting is performed for the sake of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there need be no fear of degradation. In the business field also, sometimes a businessman has to tell so many lies to make a profit. If he does not do so, there can be no profit. Sometimes a merchant says, oh, my dear customer, for you I am making no profit. Have you ever heard of a very common thing in India, right? They say, I'm not making any money with this. Yeah. They're lying. Of course, how can they sell things without making money? You tell me. How long will their business go on? But they say that just to sell it, right? I used to say that also when I was doing business. This is my cost price, or this is less than what it costs. They love to hear that, This is less than what I paid for it. Oh, they love to hear that. But one should know that without profit, the merchant cannot exist. Therefore, it should be taken as a simple lie if a merchant says that he is not making profit. But the merchant should not think that because he is engaged in an occupation in which the telling of lies is compulsory, he should give up his profession and pursue the profession of a brahmana. That is not recommended. Whether one is a kshatriya, a vaishya, or a sudra doesn't matter if he serves by his work the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even brahmanas who perform different types of sacrifice sometimes must kill animals, because sometimes animals are sacrificed in such ceremonies. Similarly, if a kshatriya engaged in his own occupation kills an enemy, there is no sin incurred. In the 3rd chapter, these matters have been clearly and elaborately explained. Every person should work for the purpose of yajna, or for Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anything done for personal sense gratification is a cause of bondage. The conclusion is that everyone should be engaged according to the particular mode of nature he has acquired, and he should decide to work only to serve the supreme cause of the Supreme Lord. Okay, so that is Bhagavad Gita. That's Krishna speaking. It's not somebody speculating. Krishna is making a very clear statement here about, let's say you're not a pure devotee. Well, none of us are actually pure devotees, but you can follow the varnashram system, and that will give you gradual elevation to the level of becoming a pure devotee if you follow it properly. And that means you have to do your duties according to your modes of nature. So there are 3 modes of nature, and you can decide, you can determine what mode is most prominent in your life by what you eat, by the friends that you have, and by the activities and desires you have. Like if your desire is always hoarding money, right? Like a crab. Crabs, they grab things and they take it and they hide it somewhere, right? So if you're hoarding money, that means that you are a banya. And banyas, they love money. It gives them ecstasy, right? They don't get ecstasy by chanting Hare Krishna. They don't get ecstasy by eating prasadam. They don't get ecstasy by going on Sankirtan. But they get ecstasy by money. That's what gives them their strength and their vitality. They get the ecstasy by hoarding money, right? I got so much in stocks, and I got so much in jewelry, and I got so much invested in this business and that business and this thing and that thing. So, therefore, they're not actually, pure devotees. They are pure banyas. So, therefore, they get caught by the laws of karma. They will definitely suffer terribly in this lifetime because they can't stop this preoccupation, thinking all the time about how much money they have. Okay, so there's a higher swadharma and a lower swadharma. So the higher swadharma is pure Krishna consciousness. The lower swadharma is following as strictly as you can the varnashram dharma system. And both are prescribed duties. That means things that you must do. Just like, what is a swadharma in Krishna consciousness? Well, if you get initiated, you make a vow. What is your vow? I will never eat meat, gamble, or engage in illicit sexual activity, or take intoxication. And I will every day chant minimum 16 good rounds. There's no maximum. You can chant 100 good rounds if you want, right? So this is our swadharma. So this is explained in the 3rd chapter, 35th verse, where it says, let's take a look at that. 3rd chapter, 35th verse. Shreyan swadharmo viguna paradharmat swanustitat swadharme nidanam shreya paradharmo mayavaha. It is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties, even though faultily, than another's duties perfectly. Destruction in the course of performing one's own duty is better than engaging in another's duties, for to follow another's path is dangerous. So, what is our swadharma? It's the vow you make when you're initiated. And that is no meat eating, no gambling, etc., etc. Right? What is the higher swadharma? That is the vow you make when you get Brahman initiation, and then the vow you make when you get married. These are all vows that you make, promises that have to be absolutely kept. The vow of marriage is there's never going to be separation. There's never going to be divorce, you see. So these are things that we don't understand clearly, and that now I want to explain them very clearly so everybody understands. You break those vows, you will suffer tremendously in this lifetime. Not only suffer mental problems, but you'll suffer physical problems because you broke these inviolable vows. Look that word up, inviolable. I-N-V-I-O-L-A-B-L-E, inviolable. And those are laws that you cannot break. If you break them, you will suffer because they're laws. They're laws of karma established by Krishna. You make a vow of marriage that there will never be divorce, and you break it, you're going to suffer. You make a vow that no illicit sex, you engage in illicit sex, you're going to suffer. You make a vow, I'm never going to eat meat or fish or eggs or chicken or this thing or that thing, but you break that vow, you're going to suffer because you made a vow. If you don't make a vow, well, you'll suffer also, but it might be a little bit less because you didn't make the vow. But you make the vow and you break it, you're going to suffer tremendously. Okay, what does it say? Inviolable. You see that word? No, but anyway, what does that say? Not able to what? Yeah. Inviolable. I-N-V-I-O-A-B-L-E.
Never to be broken.
What?
Never to be broken.
Exactly. Never to be broken. So you make a vow and you break it, you're going to suffer. And you make the vow of marriage, you make the vow of initiation, and first initiation, you make the vow of Brahminical initiation, second initiation, and then there's a marriage vow, and then there's promises that you make sometimes to people, right? And then if someone takes sannyas, they have sannyas vows. These are all serious, serious things. You break any of those vows, you suffer tremendously. Okay, so one should therefore discharge his prescribed duties in full Krishna consciousness rather than those prescribed for others. Materially, prescribed duties are duties enjoined according to one's psychophysical condition under the spell of the modes of material nature. So, every one of us is controlled by the modes of material nature. So, therefore, we should at least come to the mode of goodness. And then, by concentrated effort, graduate from the mode of goodness to transcendental goodness. Then we're free. And you can't really begin devotional service until you are transcendental to the modes of material nature. So, but if you follow the regulative principles and chant Hare Krishna, very quickly you can attain that position. But if you don't chant your rounds properly, and you are just thinking about making money all the time, or you have hatred in your heart for someone and you're trying to get revenge, whatever, then the whole process is thwarted, stopped, right? Okay, so then it says, spiritual duties are as ordered by the spiritual master for the transcendental service of Krishna. But whether material or spiritual, one should stick to his prescribed duties even up to death, rather than imitate another's prescribed duties. Duties on the spiritual platform and duties on the material platform may be different. So you see there's the upper swadharma and the lower swadharma. Right? Lower occupational duties and higher occupational duties. Right? Duties on the spiritual platform and duties on the material platform may be different, but the principles of following the authorized direction is always good for the performer. When one is under the spell of the modes of material nature, one should follow the prescribed duties for his particular situation and should not imitate others. So you cannot be a Maha Bhagavat devotee if you're still attached to making money and attached to sense gratification. Don't even think of it. Right? Don't think of becoming a sannyasi or you want to become a mahant or this. Don't even think of it. Just remain humble and meek and follow the rules and regulations of your nature, right? And prescribed duties. So when one is under the spell of the modes of material nature, one should follow the prescribed duties for his particular situation and should not imitate others. For example, a brahmana who is in the mode of goodness is non-violent, whereas a kshatriya who is in the mode of passion is allowed to be violent. As such, for a kshatriya, it is better to be vanquished or defeated following the rules of violence than to imitate a brahmana who follows the principles of nonviolence. Everyone has to cleanse his heart by a gradual process, not abruptly. However, when one transcends the modes of material nature and is fully situated in Krishna consciousness, he can perform anything and everything under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master. So it didn't say you can do anything you want. It says under the direction of the spiritual master, right? In that complete stage of Krishna consciousness, the kshatriya may act as a brahmana or a brahmana may act as a kshatriya. So we have examples of that. Like, for example, Dronacharya, he was a brahmana, but he acted like a kshatriya. Right? And he taught kshatriya principles to the Pandavas and the Kurus. In that complete stage of Krishna consciousness, the kshatriya may act as a brahmana or a brahmana may act as a kshatriya. In the transcendental stage, the distinctions of the material world do not apply. For example, Vishwamrita was originally a kshatriya, but later on he acted as a brahmana, whereas Parasuram was a brahmana who later on acted as a kshatriya. Being transcendentally situated, they could do so, but as long as one is on the material platform, he or she must perform duties according to the modes of material nature. At the same time, he or she must have a full sense of Krishna consciousness. Okay, this is very interesting. And then in the second chapter, 31st verse. Let's take a look at that. Second chapter, 31st verse, where it says, Swadharmam apichaveksya na vikampitum arhasi dharmyat di yudyat shayonyat kshatriyasya na vidyate. Considering your specific duty as a kshatriya, you should know that there's no better engagement for you than fighting on religious principles, and so there's no need for hesitation. So this is Krishna trying to convince Arjuna. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, out of the 4 orders of social administration, the second order for the matter of good administration is called kshatriya. Shat means hurt. One who gives protection from harm is called kshatriya. Trayate, to give protection from shat, or hurt. The kshatriyas are trained for killing in the forest. A kshatriya would go into the forest and challenge a tiger face to face and fight with the tiger with his sword. When the tiger was killed, he would be offered the royal order of cremation. In other words, they would cremate the tiger with all honors. Right? When the tiger was killed, it would be offered the royal order of cremation. This system has been followed even up to the present day by the Kshatriya kings of Jaipur state. The Kshatriyas are specially trained for challenging and killing because religious violence is sometimes a necessary factor Therefore, Kshatriyas are never meant for accepting directly the order of sannyas or renunciation. Nonviolence in politics may be a diplomacy, but it is never a factor or principle. In the religious law books, it is stated, aha vesu mito nyonyam, and so forth. In the battlefield, a king or kshatriya, while fighting another king, envious of him, is eligible for achieving heavenly planets after death. As the Brahmanas also attain the heavenly planets by sacrificing animals in the sacrificial fire. Therefore, killing on the battlefield on religious principles and killing animals in the sacrificial fire are not at all considered to be acts of violence, because everyone is benefited by the religious principles involved. The animal sacrifice gets a human life immediately without undergoing the gradual evolutionary process from one form to another. And the Kshatriya killed on the battlefield also attains the heavenly planets, as do the Brahmanas who attain them by offering sacrifice. There are two kinds of swadharmas, specific duties. As long as one is not liberated, one has to perform the duties of his particular body in accordance with religious principles in order to achieve liberation. When one is liberated, one's swadharma, specific duty, becomes spiritual and is not in the material bodily concept. In the bodily conception of life, there are specific duties for the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas respectively, and such duties are unavoidable. Swadharma is ordained by the Lord, and this will be clarified in the 4th chapter. On the bodily plane, Swadharma is called Varnashram Dharma, or man's stepping stone for spiritual understanding. Human civilization begins from the stage of Varnashram Dharma, or specific duties in terms of the specific modes of nature of the body obtained. Discharging one's specific duty in any field of action in accordance with the orders of higher authorities serves to elevate one to a higher status of life. So, we can assume that we're all Sudras, because unless our parents did the Garbhadan Samskar, we are considered Sudras. And therefore, as Sudras, we should follow the orders or instructions of bona fide gurus always, and never make any action that is not sanctioned by bona fide Siksha and Diksha gurus. Why? Because we're Sudras. We don't know what's what. We don't know what's right, what's wrong. We'll make all kinds of mistakes in our life. Therefore, we should be very careful to eventually accept a bona fide guru and follow strictly the instructions given to us by the guru. Now, if we don't, then we suffer. So if we're suffering, it's because we're not following strictly. It's very simple. It's not complicated. If you're suffering, it's because you're not following strictly. If you start following strictly, the suffering will go away. But most people, they say, from now on, I'm going to follow everything strictly. But they don't. Because they have this weakness. They don't really believe that God is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They don't believe that there are modes of material nature. They don't believe that there's Yamaraj, right? And that's all because of ignorance. Okay, so we'll stop there today. This is a very interesting subject, this Swadharma. Are there any questions? Question.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Haribol.
So if we have committed sins in the past before understanding about Krishna, or are committing mistakes now, like unknowingly, for example, you walk on a street and you might be stepping on an ant without knowing.
Yeah.
So these are things which you're committing now, even with the understanding of Krishna unknowingly, or before your understanding of Krishna, you might have committed mistakes for sure. What do we do in these cases?
Well, the question is, what were you going to do when you accidentally stepped on the ant? Were you going to do something for sense gratification, or were you going to do something for devotional service?
No, I was saying you don't even know that you stepped on an ant.
No, but you do know what you were going to do. So if you were going to do some nonsense, yes, you get the reaction. If it was in the process, like going on Sankirtan, you're protected. So whenever we deviate, we're not protected anymore. So it all depends on what your desire is and what you're doing. If your desire is to do some nonsense, then you're not protected. If your desire and your activity is to serve Krishna under the order of the bona fide gurus, Siksha and Diksha gurus, then you're protected. Okay?
Makes sense. So once you have understood or have this higher knowledge, if you're doing, like, let's say you're going to a movie, and on that way you
You're not
stepped on an ant,
protected.
you're not protected.
You're not protected.
But if you're going on Sankirtan, like doing duties that are prescribed by your guru for Krishna, in that, if you unknowingly commit some mistakes,
Unknowingly, yes.
it's okay.
You're protected.
What can you do about, before understanding Krishna? I mean, I'm definitely sure I have committed mistakes. What do you do about those?
Well, you suffer. You know, and we all of us suffer because we're making mistakes. But once we learn not to do anything that's not connected to Krishna and sanctioned by bona fide gurus, then it'll stop. But if we keep making the same mistakes over and over again, it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop. The suffering will not stop. Okay?
Thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Yes. Microphone.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes.
Are our memories part of soul or are they part of body?
What's that? Say that again.
Like are our memories like the things we think or like the things we remember, are those part of the body or are those part of soul? So-
Well, things that we remember. Is that
Yeah.
what you said?
Yes.
So the memory is part of the subtle body. You have two bodies. You have the gross body and the subtle body. The gross body is made of earth, water, fire, air, and ether. The subtle body is made of mind, intelligence, and false ego. So when your gross body dies, your subtle body does not die. It's the subtle body that carries the soul to the next body. Okay? So does that answer your question?
So when the soul goes to the next body, will our memories be also transferred to that body or they will not get transferred?
The memories are there in the subtle mind, but you will forget at the moment of death, moment of birth.
Okay. After the birth, we will forget that.
You will forget. Yeah. While you're in the womb, you're not forgetting. You know what you did in previous life, but as soon as you're born, you forget. Why is that? So if so that you have a free choice when you're born. If you remember all the mistakes you made in previous life, you'll be forced to surrender to God. But so that you voluntarily surrender to God, Krishna makes it so that you forget everything at birth. And look, of course, there's cesarean birth and there's regular birth. In regular birth, when the baby is born, I don't know if you've noticed it, that they have to come out of the womb of the mother, and as they come out, it squeezes their head. Now, if they come out first by their head, you'll see that the head is squeezed so much. There's a ring around it, and it's not round. It's more like an oval, right? Because of the squeezing, the mother had to squeeze to get the baby out, right? That is extremely painful for the baby. because it's like you put the head in a vice, and you tighten the vice, and because the head is very soft at birth, if it was hard like it is now, you would die. But that squeezing makes you forget everything. Now, when there's a cesarean birth, it's a little bit different, but still the same result is there. You'll forget everything. And then, so that if you voluntarily surrender to Krishna, then you go back to Godhead. If you refuse to surrender to Krishna, you don't go back to Godhead. But you're not forced to surrender because you forgot everything you did in previous life. But you can get an idea of what you did in previous life by the karma you have in this life. Like I had an idea. By the time I was 18, I realized I had very bad karma. And I didn't know what to do. But when I met the devotees, and they explained what karma was, then I understood I better become a devotee, because otherwise I'm in big trouble. Because you don't know what your karma is. You can only know when things happen. But enough things happened to me by the time I was 18 or 20 that I figured out I had very bad karma, and I should surrender. Okay? So you have two bodies. You have a subtle body and you have a gross body. The gross body will die. The subtle body doesn't die at death. The subtle body carries your soul to the next body. Now, if you're a devotee, your next body will be spiritual. Then you get rid of the subtle body also, and you have your spiritual body. But if you're not, then you're always going to have that spiritual body that will carry you to the next material body after death. Therefore, you want to use this lifetime as a human being to purify both bodies, gross and subtle, so that you can go back to Godhead in your eternal spiritual body. The spiritual body is covered by these two bodies, subtle and gross bodies. You have to get rid of both. Most people don't realize that. If you talk about a subtle body carrying you to your next birth, you explain that to some materialistic person, whether they're Hindu or they're Christian or atheist, they'll just laugh at you. Say, "What are you talking about? I only have one body. What is this subtle body? I don't believe that. And it's going to take me to my next body. I don't believe there's a next body. Why don't you try it? Explain this to somebody at work. See what they say. Yeah.
This is the online question from Chaitanya Sundar Prabhuji. Follow up to Ramani Mataji's question. Krishna says, Aham.
Follow up to what?
Mataji's question.
Okay.
Krishna says, Aham Tvam Sarva Papebhyo in 18.66. So will it not clear the past mistakes and karma associated with it?
What? If what?
So will it not clear the past mistakes and karma associated with it?
Well, yes, but what if you commit more sins after initiation? Then you have a new set of karmic reactions. Like not following your vows. That's a sin. You see. So just because your karma was cleared, it's not cleared, it's put on hold. It's not completely clear, it's put on hold to give you a chance to be Krishna conscious. But if you make more karma after you're initiated, you have to suffer. And, by the way, the old karma comes back if you break the vows. Okay? And if you break the vows and leave the movement, it comes back, like viciously.
Maharaj, only when we surrender our karma is hold, right?
Yes. Surrender to bona fide guru, initiating guru and shiksha guru. Okay? Haribol. Let's hurry up. Go ahead.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Just one clarification question on 231.
Yeah.
So it says there are two kinds of Swadharma, specific duties.
There's a lower Swadharma and higher Swadharma.
So is it same as Dharma and Sanatan Dharma? Is it the same?
No, the original Varnashram Dharma is the lower Dharma. And Krishna consciousness is the higher Dharma. Dharma means what your duties are, what you have to do.
Yes.
Right? So someone will say, well, my lower Dharma is to do parikram, or do this, say this, Lalita, well, anyway, the Vishnu Sahasram Sutram so many times a day, So that's part of the ritual performances. That's considered lower Swadharma. Right? Or I have to take care of my family, or I have to do this, or I have to do that. That's the lower Swadharma. The higher Swadharma is pure Krishna consciousness. He's going down the steps. Is that okay?
So does it mean lower Swadharma means Dharma? Is it?
The regular Dharma.
And the higher Swadharma means Sanatan Dharma.
Pure devotion.
Pure devotion service.
Yeah. Any other question? You had a question? Yeah. Give her the microphone. Microphone. This is good exercise. This is good exercise for you.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. So when we own nature, so this own nature, the propensity, how we can transform, I understand that, Kshatriya cannot become Brahmana or Shudras cannot become Brahmana. How can we purify?
You follow the rules and regulations that you promised at initiation. That's the answer. What's your question? If you don't follow them strictly, then you're violating a vow that you made. It's very serious. Of course, you might not think it's serious, but it is very serious. Go ahead.
Maharaj, can you do your higher Swadharma without doing your lower Swadharma properly?
Well, if you do the higher Swadharma properly, yes. And if you don't do it properly, no. I mean, you're making a vow. You understand? Initiation is a vow. It's a sacred vow. It's not, I may do it, I may not do it. That's before you get initiated. I may follow Krishna, I may not. You're making a vow that you're going to strictly follow the rest of your life. And if you break the vow, you're going to suffer very, very severe consequences. So yeah, you have to think very carefully about it, taking initiation. It's not a joke. It's not like, oh, well, that guy did it and he's an idiot, so I should do it too, No, it's nothing like that. This is a very serious decision that you make. It has very heavy consequences if you break it. But look, you already have heavy consequences for not being Krishna conscious in ignorance. Just imagine how heavy the consequences are when you accept consciously Krishna consciousness and promise to follow it. The reactions are a little bit less when you're in ignorance, right? But now with knowledge, you accept it and you broke purposely. It's very serious.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay, we'll stop right there. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. You see, the reward is so great that the process is very, let's say, difficult. It's difficult for the people who are not honest, and very easy for people who are completely honest. It just depends on what your determination is. If you say, I'm not going to do this nonsense ever again, then it's easy. But if you make a vow and break it, and it becomes a regular thing, then it's a very, very serious offense.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
how we maintain affection means sometimes we feel yeah Krishna is near to us, we close eye we can see some light, some god feelings. Sometimes it's a fade and we try to chanting, we do routine work chanting, we read a Bhagavad Gita every day, but sometimes it's a fade, sometimes it's more bright, why it affects how we maintain same
If
bhakti
you come
aradhana.
regularly to class and chant your rounds and ask questions, you'll be able to steadily maintain. You talked about affection, right? Affection, like you're loving your husband or loving your children or loving your family members. Is that
Not
what you're
family,
talking?
but sometimes we feel very good. Yeah, Krishna is with us.
Yeah.
In my hand is with Krishna.
Yeah.
Sometimes we feel that means basically in a material world, material tears, we will cry or we will in sad moment,
Right.
or in a happiness moment, we feel no, he is not here. Means
Okay, so that's due to forgetfulness, and the way you remember who you are, what your duties in life are, what your responsibilities are, is to sit down and chant quietly with nobody disturbing you. You go Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare, and meditate that Krishna is in your heart. He's the closest person to you. Because of forgetting that, all these other thoughts come into the mind and you become chanchal. You know what chanchal means, right? You become chanchal. But when you just sit down and just meditate, Krishna is in my heart. He's the closest person to me. And your way to connect to Krishna is to chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And little by little, you'll get that strength again to come back to who you actually are and what your duties are in life, right? So whenever you feel that, what's called waning or less convictions and anxiety and things like that, you just sit down and chant quietly, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, so you can hear it, not quietly, but enough to hear it. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That's the way you're talking to Krishna, and he's right in your heart, right there. He's the closest person to you, but you've forgotten that. So now you're going to remember it very powerfully, and you'll see your mind will become peaceful again, and you can not forget that Krishna is the closest person to you, and he's going to help you in all situations. Okay, that's what I do. I have to do it often. Haribol. Okay, guess who's going to sing? Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma
Hey Guru Charana Kevala Bhakti Sadma
Banna Mori Sabadana Mate
Bando Mui Sabadana Mate
Jara Prasade Bye E Baba Tori Ajay
Shanara Prasade Bhai E Baba Tadiya Jai
Krishna Prabhu Hoy Jai Hoy te
Krishna prapti hoya hoite.
Gurumukha Padma Vakya
Chitete
Chite Koriya Kya
Guru Mukha Padma Vaikya Chitete Koriya Aikya
Erana Koriyo Mane Asha
Na Koriya Mane Asa
Shri Guru Charane Rati Esse Utama Gati
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Utamagati
Jai Prasade Pure Sarva
Ye Prasade Pure Sarvasa
चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
Chakshudan Dilaje Janame Janme Prabhu Se
दिव्य गाएंगे मैं प्रकाशित
Divya Gani De Prakashito
प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते
Prema Bhakti Jahote Avidya Vinasahajate
वेद का जहर चरित
Eve Ashturacharito
श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आज मज्जनर बंधु
Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu
लोके ना लोके रजीवाना
Lokinath Lokera Jivana
हा हा प्रभु खोर दय देह मोरे पद छाया
Ha Prabhu Kura Doya Deya More Padachaya
एबे गज गुशु त्रिभुवाना
Ebeas Sukhi Bhuvana
शील प्रभु पाता पिता पवाना
Prabhupada Patita Pavana
गुरुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा
Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva
हे गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा
Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva
नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांता स्वामी नित्यानामिने
Namah Vishnu Padaya Haribol, Haribol. Yes, Prabhu. 10:30? Is that okay? Yeah. What?
नमस्ते सरस्वती
No.
देवे
I don't have to have much.
गौरवाणी
What I want to no, what I want to do, I
ऋणे
want to take pictures of the
निर्विशेष शून्यवादी
fence.
पाशता विषतारिणे
Namaste Saraswati Deve
Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivadari Gaur Bhakta Brinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Pararajikachas Tarasatarasi Shishimad, His Divine Grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem Chikaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Samkunda Radha Kunda Giri Godan ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Shri Mayapura Dham ki jai. Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai. Tulasi Devi ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Ganga Maya ki jai. Jamuna Maya ki jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Patita Pavani ki jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale. Namaste. You may say, Sister. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, friend of the poor, Lord and Master of the Buddhas. Oh, Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread all the